Welcome back to Rural Health Matters. I'm Christina Loren. Joining us once again is world-renowned Dr. Jeffrey Gold, the Chancellor of the University of Nebraska Medical Center. And now we welcome tonight's special guest, Senator Roger Marshall of Kansas, also known as Doc Marshall. Before becoming a senator, he practiced medicine in Great Bend, Kansas for 25 years, delivering more than 5,000 babies and running a business that eventually employed more than 300 people. He also served in the U.S. Army, and as a U.S. Senator, he serves on the Ag, the Health, the Homeland Security, and Budget committees. He has done great things for rural America in a very short amount of time so far in office. We're so grateful to have you on. Welcome, Senator Marshall. Now, one of our favorite topics is the future of health care in rural America. While unfortunately some rural health care facilities are closing their doors, you have a vision that could revitalize rural health care. Tell us about your vision and how your personal experience as a doctor has informed your outlook.
Well, Christina, great to be with you, and Dr. Gold, Happy New Year's to you and all your listeners out there. But I do have a vision, and that vision's been formed by my experiences. As you said, I spent 25 years on call every day, every other day, delivering a baby most every day. But in addition to that, I was running a hospital and oversaw 3 county health departments. So I think when you bring that personal experience to Washington, D.C., you have a little bit of an idea what's working and what's not working. What I see being successful out there in rural America are federally qualified health centers, and you may know them as community health centers. We have 32 of them across the state of Kansas. And this is where people go for their primary care. There's also dentists in most of these clinics as well, but we're also trying to bring in food banks and mental health experts and people that can teach nutrition classes and teach people how to cook as well, trying to meet people where they're at. And that would be the goal. Been working very hard on this with Bernie Sanders. Yes, Bernie Sanders is one of my closest friends up here. So we're trying to improve that access to health care. And what else we're doing in this legislation, there's a shortage of physicians and nurses in rural America. So we have extra funding available to help those areas as well.
Oh, I'm sure Dr. Gold loves hearing about that. And it is so important to reach across party lines when it comes to healthcare. Our health is our wealth. And so often in rural America, we feel like we're being overlooked. We've talked with a few of our guests on this show about the Farm Bill. Farm Bill is really important to rural America. Where are we in extending the previous bill and in passing a new one? Are there talks even starting to build at this point in Washington?
Well, they're not real serious talks. We're having some challenges. So we've extended the current Farm Bill till September 30th. So that's the good news. The challenge, though, is getting farm back in the Farm Bill. Right now, the Farm Bill is dominated by nutrition programs. Probably encompassing about 85% of the Farm Bill is nutrition programs. But what we're trying to fight for is more funding for crop insurance, as well as the Title I programs, the ARC and PLC programs. And really, what's good for agriculture is good for rural America. So whether you live in the city or out in the country, that's still the backbone of every farm bill are those 2 particular programs. So right now, it's still challenging. We're struggling to try to find the money on this. I'll just quickly say that when we did the last farm bill, we had budgeted $60 billion a year for food assistance, and we're spending $180 billion a year on food assistance. So, frankly, in a country where we're in $34 trillion of debt right now, we're struggling to find the money to make this happen. But we want to make sure that we put farm back in the Farm Bill.
It's so important. I love that you're working for our farmers and ranchers so diligently in Washington, D.C. We're going to go to the phones now where Bob joins us from Ohio tonight. Thanks for joining us, Bob. Go right ahead.
I just wanted to thank you and Dr. Gold for being on there for all these years. We've listened to you every Monday evening, but my question is that I had a knee replacement and I ended up getting some infection in it November the 21st, and I had to go back in the hospital then for pneumonia, and I spent 4 days back in there. I ended up getting COVID while I was there at the hospital, and I was just wondering how long will that natural immunity work that I had while I was in the hospital with COVID, and when can I get the booster for the next booster that's available?
Sure. Well, first of all, Bob, thanks for calling. Secondly, I'm sorry to hear you had so much trouble after getting your knee replaced. That's a really long story of hospitalization and infection. But specifically to your questions about COVID and how long the immunity lasts, some degree of immunity is going to be permanent. We call that amnestic immunity or cellular immunity. And you'll carry that with you for the rest of your life. But your acute phase immunity, meaning the levels of antibodies that you have due to COVID, if this current variant, which is the one we were just talking about, is like all of the others, the peak of your immunity starts to fall off after 90 to 120 days, so after 3 to 4 months, which is why the current recommendation for a booster vaccine, if that's something that you want to do, which is certainly our recommendation, would be somewhere between 90 and 120 days. But our advice, and certainly my advice to you, is always the same. Pick up the phone, have a chat with your local healthcare professionals. They know what other medications you're on. They know what your other risk factors might be, whether it's related to your knee surgery or the use of other antibiotics for the other infection. And they'll give you a much better understanding of when they think and if you think another dose of vaccines would be helpful. And Happy New Year to you, and I hope this year is one that's free of medical challenge for you.
Yeah, we appreciate that call very much, Bob. Thank you. That leaves a line open for you tonight, 877-731-6733. Senator Marshall, you delivered 5,000 babies in your career. Fewer and fewer rural hospitals are delivering babies this day and age. What are your thoughts on this trend, and how far did some families actually have to travel to see you for OBGYN care?
Yeah, well, Christina, the average travel distance for my patients was probably 30 minutes, but many of them live 2 to 3 hours away as well. I would just kind of point out to your listeners that hospitals are a reflection of the local economy. And as we've seen our counties shrink in size, many of the counties in Kansas have half the population of what they had 20 or 30 years ago. It's just financially impossible to deliver babies in every hospital anymore. And I would also, this is not something people talk about enough, but unless you're delivering, a baby or 3 every week, it's hard to keep the nurses updated and keep the anesthesia, the pediatrician, the skill level up as well. So I think we have to talk about quality of care as well as quantity. I think going forward, what I envision for rural America is, number one, we need really good emergency rooms. I think that issue is going to never go away. And many of our emergency rooms in rural America are now connected up to some type of a tertiary care center. These rural hospitals need to be focused on things like physical therapy and a good pharmacy, cardiac rehab, those types of things as well. But it's going to be hard, just practically speaking, harder and harder to be able to deliver babies in a situation where you're delivering one every week or one every month. So it's a challenge, but we want to make sure we have quality as well as quantity.
Absolutely. And fifth-generation farm kid, you know how important a quality ER is in a rural community. Let's go back to the phones where John joins us now of Washington. Thanks for joining us, John. Go right ahead.
Yeah, hey, doctors. My wife and I recently returned from a trip to the southeast U.S., and that was 5 days ago. And upon our return, it was the next morning, we started getting all the symptoms of COVID. We immediately took a test, and in fact, we were diagnosed with COVID through our home tests. Then we immediately contacted our doctor and asked for advice, and they prescribed Paxlovid. We were able to start the Paxlovid on day 2, I guess. And the advice of our physician was if we should start getting gastrointestinal issues, to stop the Paxlovid. So I was listening earlier to your commentary about this new variant showing signs of gastrointestinal. So we have just a bit of a conflict and a little dilemma that it poses. We did stop the Paxlovid. It's day 5 now, and we are feeling better. We have had all of the vaccines, with the exception of the last one, which for a lot of reasons we were advised not to get. But so we're kind of curious as to whether we should try to get the updated vaccine as well. So thank you for your answer. Appreciate it. Bye now.
Thanks, John, and very much appreciate that. This is a very common story that we hear, and I'm sure the senator has heard the same thing, because Paxlovid does cause a moderate amount of GI upset in a good number of people. Our advice to folks is, if they possibly can, to sort of tough that out a bit, just because the 5-day course is really considered to be the optimal course. But having said all of that, the very best healthcare advice for all of us comes from the people we trust in our local communities that know us well, that know what other medical problems we have, know what our jobs are, know what other medications we may be taking. And that's where the very best advice comes from. So if your healthcare professional advised you and your wife to stop taking the drug, then I would say that's probably the best advice you can get. As far as when to be eligible for the vaccine, again, that would come right back down to what our earlier caller asked about, and that would usually be in the 90 to 120-day range. But again, pick up the phone, call your local healthcare professional, and get their advice. I don't know, Senator, I'm sure there are a lot of folks in Kansas that get GI upset from Paxlovid. I'm sure you've heard that story as well, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, Dr. Gold. I think of course, I concur, right? Do your best, take some saltine crackers, my grandma would say. Do your best to take the take the Paxlovid the full 5 days. And if you start getting dehydrated, call your doctor. But I think that's spot on.
Let's talk a little bit about mental health. This is something that, especially with our farming communities, we probably don't do a good enough job of bringing to the forefront. And I think coming forward into 2024 and years beyond, we need to do a better job. Over the last couple years, we've been talking about it more and more, trying to reduce the stigmas. But Senator Marshall, tell us about some of the work that you've done in meeting people in their communities across the state of Kansas, and why this is so important to you right now, especially when it comes to our rural agricultural communities, when a lot of our farmers don't speak up. Sometimes it's tough.
Yeah, Christina, I appreciate you giving us a chance to even talk about this. Look, suicide is the number 1 or 2 killer for young farmers. That we have a much higher incidence in agriculture than other professions. And why wouldn't we, right? Our interest rates are through the roof, our cost of gasoline, fertilizer. I mean, the stress is very, very, very real right now. You throw on the 7 plagues of Egypt that we've had in Kansas, the drought, the hailstorms, and all those things. The pressure is very real. So we took a week and used every megaphone that we had to educate people in Kansas, and just said, this is Agriculture Farmer Mental Health Awareness Week. We went across the state and got people together, folks from the farm bureaus of the world and the Corn Association and wheat and soybeans, and we got them together with local healthcare providers. There are lots of resources out there, and just did some education with those groups, and then giving them the opportunity to take these providers back to their monthly or annual associations to talk about mental health. And if I could just make a couple quick observations. Number 1, if you know somebody, if you yourself feel like you're very depressed and you're considering taking your own life, call 988. Text or call 988 right now. With a matter of minutes, you're going to talk to a healthcare professional. And the other thing I would just point out is we all need to be good neighbors. We know who our neighbors are. We know if all of a sudden there's some changes, you need to understand what those changes look like when it comes to suicide prevention. Maybe that they're usually a person that was clean shaven and all of a sudden they have a gruffy looking beard, or they're not ever getting dressed up. They won't come to Sunday school. They quit going to cards on Saturday night. They quit going to the high school football games on Friday nights. Reach out to those people and sit down with them. Or maybe you're a loan officer at a bank or a credit union, and you know exactly who's really struggling right now. But you can pick up the phone and say, hey, let's call 988 together right now. So we just did our best to educate people. And then going back to this other vision of healthcare for rural America, working very hard to get more and more mental health folks into these rural communities, and then connecting folks up with telemedicine so they can talk with colleagues like Dr. Gold's there at the University of Nebraska.
I love it. And you go back 5 generations. We weren't talking about mental health the way that we are now 5 generations ago. Think about your family. What are some of the ways that they were able to unwind when things did get tough? Because we know that moments are fleeting, but it can feel pretty dark at times. What did your family do to get through some of those really tough moments on the farm, whether it was scripture, singing? What do you recall?
Yeah, certainly my grandpa Nelson, my mom's dad, we went to church every Sunday. Even if we had a wheat crop that needed to be, taken in and every hour counted, we would go to church on Sunday. I think that having that faith and that we prayed before meals together. I saw my grandfather lose one of the best wheat crops we ever had in early July due to a rain, and we just sat there and we watched it wilt and wilt and wilt. But it was his faith that got him through, and his neighbors and our family members, all those types of people. And my grandpa just always said, that God will provide, that he'll take care of everything that we need. So certainly we relied on our faith, but we also enjoyed, maybe going to a high school ball game. What we really enjoyed, Christina, was making homemade ice cream on a Saturday evening on top of this, what we called the cellar, if your listeners know what a cellar is. And we would fight to who got to crank the ice cream, and just sharing a few moments of that was a great time for us, just to say, okay, my grandma would say, look, if you have your health, you have everything.
You remember what it felt like to crank that ice cream? I can never forget that. Okay, we're going to pause for a quick break. 877-731-6733 is the number to call. Stay with us. We want to hear from you tonight. More Rural Health Matters right after this. Welcome back to Rural Health Matters. I'm Christina Loren. 877-731-6733 is the number to call and join our conversation. Want to try to get as many callers in as we can. Bill from Michigan joins us now. Thanks for joining us, Bill. Go right ahead.
Hi there. I've watched the show often enough that if Dr. Gold doesn't mind, I'll add him to my primary care team. Couple of questions. A friend of mine has gotten into the COVID thing finally after ignoring it since day one. He was wondering if you have to start over from scratch, run the whole series, or if you just get the booster shot, which will bring you up to date. Also, I've got a bunch of COVID tests that have expired here, and I wonder how hard and fast the expiration date is on those. It's one of those things that, like I've got a bunch of them that just expired a couple months ago. Are those still good or what? Awaiting your answers.
Well, thanks for their kind words, Bill. I'll try to address both of those. As far as your friend is concerned, no, somebody that has not gone through the primary vaccine series does not need to start at the very beginning. The only vaccines that are currently available are the most recent generation of what's referred to as the XBB 1.5. That's fancy lingo for the vaccine that was first brought out by Pfizer and Moderna, both mRNA vaccines last fall, late summer, early fall. And so depending upon how old he is and depending upon whether he's got any other comorbidities, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, etc., that would determine how many doses that he would need. But no, he definitely doesn't need to start over. Answer to your second question, my understanding is that a lot of the expiration dates on some of the COVID home tests can be easily extended. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has got a whole section on their website that talks about how much they can be extended by. And yeah, I'm just like you are, sir. I've got a whole bunch of unused home COVID tests, and I'm just holding on to them for the time being. Not sure how long they're going to last, but there are recommendations now on the manufacturer's website. So if you look at those packages, what you'll see is not only who manufactured them and the date of expiration, but you'll see there's a serial number on that package. And so if you go back to the manufacturer's website, whether it's Moderna or Pfizer or any of the others for that matter, they'll give you some good recommendations as to what to do regarding expiration. And, as you may have seen, our federal government just recently issued a whole series of updated test kits for anybody that wanted to write in on their website and get a few. So you might check that out as well.
All right. Thank you so much for that call. 877-731-6733. This is that time of year. Everybody wants to make New Year's resolutions. Senator Marshall, let's bring you back into the conversation. We know that one of your passions is that food is medicine, just like our own doctors tell us. We know we should eat better, exercise more, and take better care of ourselves in general. But can you give us some advice on how to make these changes attainable and, more importantly, sustainable going into 2024? How do we make patterns that last?
Yeah, Christine, I think that's a great question, and a question Dr. Gold and I have been trying to coach people up now for decades. I want to just quickly go back to your several questions about vaccines and give a shout out to our community pharmacists as well. They're kind of the last person standing in a lot of rural America, so please don't hesitate to talk to your community pharmacists about some of these vaccine questions. They do a great job with that. As far as New Year's resolutions, I would just tell people, make good habits. Don't make a resolution, make good habits. And I never been a calorie counter. I would just tell you this, that the simplest things to do is if God made it, it's good for you. Try to cut back on your salt by quit some of the going out to eat business, especially stay away from fast food. Salt is a big problem for the American diet right now. Those fresh fruits and vegetables from the garden, if they come right out of the garden, that's got to be what's best for you. We need more fresh and we need more frozen. And then stay away from the raw sugars. I think it's really pretty simple. I think, instead of having the baked potatoes, fine, it's the sour cream and the butters, right? So let's try to cut back on our calories a smidgen, stay away from raw sugar, try to eat healthy, fresh fruits and vegetables as well. And by the way, we all need to get out and walk for 30 minutes, some type of exercise. You don't have to go to the gym. If you can just walk for 30, 40 minutes every day, then that's going to be part of the equation as well. And it's just a little bit different today. When I was growing up, we went out, and if you worked on the farm, you were throwing bales and out feeding the cattle. You were pretty active, but now we can spend more and more time in a controlled climate area, a cab. So even farmers and ranchers may have to get out and do a little walking or maybe get on an exercise bike. Some common sense goes a long ways.
Yeah, it does. I think the hard part is doing it every day. I think, okay, 30 minutes, I can do 30 minutes a day, maybe 3 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. But to think about doing it every single day, it can become a little bit daunting. Dr. Gold, what would you like to tack on there? Because it's easy for you two, you're doctors. You know how the body works. You know things that we don't. What do you say to somebody like me who just wants to live a healthy life, but also likes to put a little sour cream on her baked potato most of the time?
I agree completely with what Senator Marshall said. Life is about moderation. It can't be all or nothing. But I am a very, very big fan of exercise as close to every day as you can. I try to do some exercise almost every morning. That just has become part of my morning routine. Unfortunately, sometimes travel and other things do get in the way. The other advice that I might give folks, I think, is something that I've tried to do, and actually I think has been helpful, is to have more of my larger meal midday and earlier in the day. and not my largest meal at night. You know, I grew up in a culture where dinner with the family was everything, and it was not that uncommon. You know, if you're, I'm sure Dr. Marshall knows this all too well, that you're in the operating room, in my case, in the delivery room, in his case, midday, and sometimes, you know, those hours fall by very quickly, and you end up, you know, with one larger meal towards the end of the day. That turns out not to be the healthiest way to eat. But, you know, I watch my step count. I try to get a reasonable number of steps every day, try to get some good aerobic exercise in the morning, and try very hard to stay away from processed food. You know, truthfully, I do like a little sour cream and butter on my baked potato, but I don't do that every night. At least I try not to.
Well, we certainly follow your example. And speaking of someone who set an amazing example, Senator Marshall, I, of course, follow politics very closely. I've watched you. You are quite an amazing man. What you've done in such a short time in Washington, D.C. for rural Americans is amazing, and I can't wait to see what you're going to continue to do going forward. But just to give people a little bit of your background, you're a fifth-generation farm kid, the first in your family to go to college. What was it that made you take a different path, knowing that you'd still be able to help your rural community, but on a much broader scale?
Yeah. Well, Christine, I grew up, my mom's family had a 160-acre farm. My granddad's was, my dad's family, a 160-acre farm. And, you know, frankly, I had 9 cousins, right, in each family by the time I was growing up. And I knew there certainly wasn't enough money to make a living on that size of farm. And I got to just tell you, every day my dad said, gosh, farming is the biggest gamble there is out there, that it's so challenging to make a living on it. And certainly God gave me some talents with science and math. I had a great deal of respect for our own family doctor and said, look, I think this is what God has in store for me, is to use those talents to become a physician. You know, those farms are still in our family, but certainly not one person can make a living on a 160-acre farm anymore. It's very capital intensive, all the things that those folks that I admire who are able to do it. But the farms you have to grow to make this economies of scale work. But I certainly had a calling from God that I wanted to be a physician, and He blessed that. I dreamed of going back to rural America and being a doctor. I got to live out that American dream. A first-generation college student, went to a local community college. My wife, a community college graduate nurse, so we're huge fans of community colleges. And that's one of the things that Senator Sanders and I put in our legislation, was more funding for nursing scholarships at that community college level. So this is what God called me to do it. It's been a great blessing, and now I feel like He's called me to be a senator and use all that knowledge and hopefully some wisdom as well for the good of rural America.
I love it. Your heart is certainly in the right place, and we need more of that in Washington, D.C. So please keep on keeping on, and do know that we are watching, and we do appreciate what you're doing in Washington. We're going to go back to the phones where Darlene joins us from Ohio tonight. Thanks for joining us, Darlene. Go right ahead. Darlene, are you with us?
Yes. I'm sorry. I was just watching it. I am just so happy to see God-fearing people in Washington. It's so refreshing. But my question was, could either of you maybe suggest a good source for finding a list of foods that are good for diabetics? It's really hard to find things out there.
Well, thank you for that question, Darlene, and I appreciate your calling in. Some of the best advice that I've seen for diabetics comes from the American Diabetic Association website. Typically has some good materials. I'm sure your local pharmacy or your local public health office would have some good information on healthy foods for diabetics. And of course, your local healthcare professionals, particularly if you're on some medication, the manufacturer of the medication frequently has some materials as well. The Centers for Disease Control has got a whole section on diabetes and good care, monitoring of your A1C levels on your diet, weight and exercise, things of that level. Senator, are you aware of other things that Darlene might do to get some good advice on healthy lifestyle and healthy eating for diabetics?
Well, I think you nailed it, Dr. Gold. I think certainly the CDC does have good things like that. So to go do a Google search, if you have access to that, on healthy food or a diabetic diet, but certainly your primary care doctor has that information as well. Your local health department, these community health centers would well. But I think it's more than just looking at a piece of paper. I think that you need, it doesn't have to be a PhD nutritionist, but just a nurse that has a knowledge treating diabetes. Like I had a couple nurses that we treated a lot of diabetes and pregnancy. They got real good at coaching people up as well. But maybe the health department would be another resource for you there, wherever you live in Ohio.
Okay. What a great show tonight. I wanted to give you both an opportunity to share your final thoughts. Yeah, thank you so much for that call. We appreciate you, Darlene. Senator Marshall, what are your final thoughts for our viewers tonight?
Oh gosh, Christine, it's just great to be on the air with you and Dr. Gold. It's great to celebrate the new year with you as well, to celebrate rural America. You know, I keep one of my sayings is, as agriculture goes, so goes Kansas. So I appreciate you, your farmers and ranchers. I appreciate you all giving us a chance to tell our story as well. And just grateful to be with you tonight. Thanks so much.
And Dr. Gold, what are your final thoughts for us tonight?
Well, first of all, just to thank Senator Marshall and tell him how grateful I am that we have physicians in our federal legislature who are as insightful and as caring and as experienced as he is. Having somebody that's been in the trenches, particularly in rural America, be the people that are making our laws and deciding on how we're going to spend our taxpayer dollars is very, very reassuring to me. And secondly, Christine, as we said in the opening remarks, unfortunately, the spread of COVID, RSV, and influenza is probably going to get worse before it gets better. So our best advice to our audience tonight is be super careful. Make sure you take care of yourself. Get tested if you need to get tested. If you test positive, please reach out to your local healthcare professional. There's a lot of good treatment out there for all of these diseases to prevent serious illness and hospitalization.
Absolutely. And thanks to you, we know about them. We're going to be here for you every Monday night. I want to thank you both for joining us. UNMC Chancellor Dr. Jeffrey Gold, Senator Roger Marshall. Now, if we didn't get a chance to get to your question, leave us a voice recording on our hotline. I want to make sure you have a pen so that we can get your question answered. 855-776-6147. You can record it. If you don't like the way it turns out the first time, go ahead and redo it. Remember, you can catch Rural Health Matters every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern right here on RFD-TV. That's 5 Central. Thank you so much for joining us. Wishing you and your family a beautifully blessed evening.